My name is Felipa, and if you are new to this channel, this is day 4 of 365 of my reading plan to read the whole Bible. So I started on September 1st. Today is September 4th. It's day 4. And I have read the sections from chapter 9 all the way to chapter 11, verse 32. And here are my key takeaways. So we begin by God blessing Noah and his generation, all his family members. And it's interesting because on chapter 9, verse 4, it says, "But flesh with the life thereof, which is the blood thereof, shall ye not eat." I find that perplexing, and I will come back to that. Um, Unfortunately, we have the great fall of Noah, and it says that he started having a vineyard and making wine. And then he got drunk, which I'm guessing is a no-no, and he got naked in his tent, and Ham, the father of Canaan, saw the nakedness of his father and told his two brethren without. And then the two brothers, Shem and Japheth, um, covered their dad, Noah. But when he awoke from the wine, it says that Noah cursed Canaan. And I found that a little bit perplexing, to be honest with you, because it was Ham that found him, his dad, not Canaan. So, long story short, by verse 29, it says that after a very long life, Noah died, which is very interesting because if you remember back a couple of chapters ago, people who are favored by God, which we presumed Noah was favored by God because he was spared during the flood, is no longer seemingly a favorite or favored by God because he dies. He does not walk with God, and he dies instead of being taken up to heaven and just ceasing to exist. The other thing that I thought was interesting, let's see where I am. That there's a list of the generations of Noah starting in chapter 10, and it covers the sons of Ham and the sons of Shem. But very interesting enough, there is no sons of Japheth. So that was kind of interesting. I'm not sure the significance behind there. Also, just because of like all the dates and all the names that are listed, I was thinking this book was written literally thousands of years ago. And so there are clearly going to be things that are not relevant and perhaps nonsensical to somebody reading it today, as it was to somebody who was reading it back in the day, especially when you consider the importance of creating and keeping a historical record, which I believe this is a part of that, especially when you're talking about establishing the earth. Who, what were the nations? What were the tongues? What were the regions? Who lived there? What was the drama, or what alliances were there? So the births and the deaths and the families and the conflicts. So it makes sense to me that there's a bunch of stuff that perhaps doesn't make sense to me. And then we go into chapter 11, verse 2, and it says that pretty much there's one language in the world, and now we have this massive amount of people who are the descendants of basically Noah's generation. And so we move on to verse 5, where there is an establishment that there's a confusion of languages. And so that's interesting because in verse 6, it says, "And the Lord said, Behold, the people is one, and they have all one language, and this they begin to do. And now nothing will be restrained from them which they have imagined to do." And I almost see this as God saying that he is giving full autonomy and a free will to man, to humanity. And he's saying they have no limitation except to the extent of what their imagination can put forward. But then, very interestingly enough, the next verse, verse 7, says, "Go to, let us go down and there confound their language, that they may not understand one another's speech. So I find that very interesting and peculiar as well. And I wonder if perhaps God noticed and realized and became aware of the fact that man had one universal language and speech at this point, and that perhaps they're imagined collectively, because of this one unified collective language, was too strong. They were going to be invincible because they were all working together. And he decided to go down to earth and mess up the language so that they would not understand each other's speech. And then he also scattered them abroad across all of the face of the earth, which kind of goes to maybe support the theory that I have, that he wants people to not have the same language, be scattered across the earth. And it might be because God could sense that with one language and with all of the humans in one area congregated, that perhaps it was going to be too powerful. Just a theory, not sure, but that's what I'm thinking. And then we go on to talk about the generations of Shem, the ancestor of Abraham. And we pretty much talk about that on and on and on. This is the first section in verse 30, where we see for the first time that one of the women involved was barren and had no child. And so that's interesting that that was made note of, because I wonder if that's perhaps the first time that this is happening and recorded. And that is it for my reflections of day 4 of 365 of reading the Bible, one day at a time, for the year-long plan of this commitment. So tomorrow is day 5 of 365, and I am on chapter 12. God calls Abram, blesses him with a promise of Christ. So I will see you tomorrow.